The Orioles have officially named Zach Eflin as their 2025 opening day starter, and it looks like he might have his all-star shortstop behind him. I'll get you all those spring training notes and updates coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, March 17th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going through some spring training news and notes. We've got injury updates on Gunnar Henderson, Grayson Rodriguez, and Ramon Arias. We've got some pitching news on guys like Zach Eflin, Albert Suarez, and others we will talk about, and some hitting news as well, guys like Heston Kjerstad and others who impressed over the weekend. We'll talk about the spring breakout game between the Orioles and Yankees prospects, and much, much more. It's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So let's recap 5 spring training games that have happened since we last talked. The Orioles had one game on Friday. Unfortunately, that one was no StatCast, no broadcast. We'll have a little bit from that game. They had 2 games on Saturday. The first one against the Pirates, we did get a broadcast and a StatCast. The evening game was the spring breakout game, which is all top prospects between the Orioles and the Yankees. No StatCast, but we did have an MLB Network broadcast for that one, so we'll talk about that. And then on Sunday, there was a split squad for the Orioles, so they had a home game, which was no broadcast, no StatCast. And then they had an away game against the Tigers. There was no broadcast for that one, but there is StatCast data. So we have some things to pick through, and we will begin with the pitching side from this weekend. And from the weekend on the pitching side, we will start with Tomoyuki Sugano, who pitched in the no broadcast, no StatCast game on Friday night, but we did get some words from the Orioles beat writers on what went on in that one. And for Sugano, he took a no-hitter into the 4th inning. And again, it is spring training, but that is always nice to see. And he has continued to not allow a run so far in spring. In his 4 appearances with the Orioles in spring training, 10 1/3 scoreless innings, 5 hits, 11 strikeouts, and 3 walks. Now, we talk about when guys have bad stats in spring training, they don't really matter. They also don't really matter that much if you have good stats in spring training. It's kind of the same thing on either side, but all things being equal, you'd rather have your spring stats look good rather than bad, especially for a pitcher who has never thrown a pitch in Major League Baseball coming over from Japan. This is certainly a good start in the spring for Tomoyuki Sugano. His velo was up to 94, sitting 92, 93. Apparently, that's pretty normal for him, what we saw from him in Japan when he won the MVP in the NPB last season. And when you add it to the fact that Charlie Morton also is not allowed to run in his 3 spring training starts, again, the stats don't matter much, but it's nice to see the 2 veteran starters that the Orioles have brought in. They're both going to begin the year in their rotation, just feeling good, looking good in spring training, and ready to begin this season with all the other question marks kind of surrounding them in this Orioles starting rotation. We also had Felix Bautista throw on Friday. Unfortunately, couldn't see it, didn't get the data, but he did throw a 1-2-3 inning. His fastball was apparently up to 98. That is the 4th game outing for Felix so far this spring. The goal was apparently to get him into 6 or 7 games. Brandon Hyde at one point said the backfield's outings also counted, of which Felix had 2 of them before the 4-game outing. So technically, he's at a total of 6. But if they do want him to get into 2 more games, I mean, there are still 8 days, or I guess I believe the Orioles have 7 games remaining, and Felix could easily pitch in 2 or 3 of those and be ready for opening day. Not a guarantee, but it feels like we are at least tracking that direction of Bautista being on the opening day roster. A pitcher who it's not going so well for in the bullpen is Seranthony Dominguez. Now, he pitched over the weekend, and he may have actually added another breaking ball. He pitched in the Saturday game that we had the broadcast and the StatCast data, and he allowed 3 runs over 2/3 of an inning. Now, he should have put up a 0. Now, he did load the bases, but he got a ground ball to second, and an Orioles infield prospect, Colin Burns, just booted a ground ball, didn't make the play, should have ended the inning. Instead, it extended it, allowed a run to score. 2 more came in later. they didn't call it an error. They called it an infield hit. That should have been an error. There should have been unearned runs for Dominguez. Again, doesn't super matter in spring, but his spring stats are fairly ugly. Everyone's going to see a 23.14 ERA. Yes, that is not 3.14. That is 23.14. Dominguez in 4 2/3 innings this spring, 14 hits, 12 earned runs, 9 strikeouts, 5 walks, and 4 home runs allowed. Now, he did not allow a home run on Saturday. That is good. His stuff looked good from watching all 30 or so pitches that he threw in that outing. And I also think he's added a new breaking ball. What we've usually seen from Seranthony Dominguez is fastball, sinker, slider. Now, StatCast says 20 of his 38 pitches were sliders on Saturday, but when you dive into the individual pitch data and you watch all of those 20 quote-unquote sliders, many of them were very different. It had his minimum velocity at 82 and his maximum velocity at 88 on his slider. What I'll tell you is those pitches that were around 87, 88, that looked like his regular slider, which he generally throws 87 to 88 miles an hour up to 89. Those pitches that were 82 to 83 that he threw, that looked more like a curveball. It's a pitch Dominguez has never thrown, whether with the Phillies or with the Orioles, maybe adding in a different breaking ball. And Dominguez is a guy who can struggle against lefties. Generally, when you're throwing a breaking ball as a right-handed pitcher, the curveball is a much better weapon than the slider is against left-handed hitters. So maybe that is Dominguez's answer to his home run problem against lefty batters, is to add in a curveball. Looked pretty good out of his hand, a little slower, a little loopier, but he was able to land it for strikes. Those are all good things for Dominguez. Again, you don't love having a 23 ERA, but he is clearly one of the Orioles' 8 best relievers. He clearly has an opening day spot in this bullpen. He's still going to be a guy who, again, down the stretch at one point last year when Craig Kimbrell lost the job, Seranthony Dominguez was the Orioles' closer after they brought him in from the Phillies at the deadline. Brandon Hyde, I think, still trusts this guy out of the pen. He has a lot of late inning experience dating back to his time in Philadelphia, got a lot of good postseason experience with the Phillies as well, pitched well in both Oriole playoff games last year, was pretty good down the stretch. I'm not super worried about it. Again, it's not great to be giving up that many runs. You'd rather it not happen, but I believe in the stuff, and I'm going to wait until this happens a few times in games that actually matter when the regular season kicks off before I get worried about Seranthony Dominguez and this stuff. Still looking good. You know, velocity on his fastball, he was still 97, 98. I'm still feeling good on what he can do for the Orioles. He's going to be a huge part of this bullpen, especially early on when Felix Bautista is kind of limited in what the Orioles are letting him do. Keegan Aiken and Gregory Soto also looked solid out of the pen in that game Saturday. Stuff looking their usual. Haven't really talked much about either, but both lefties are going to be in this Orioles opening day bullpen, going to get some key outs for them. And it's probably a good sign we haven't talked about them much. Like, it also means they really haven't been like adding pitches or adding movement or velocity. They're kind of the same pitchers they were last year, but that's fine. Aiken was awesome. Soto was the Orioles' best reliever down the stretch after those 3 bad outings. So I'll take a repeat of what they gave the Orioles in 2024. And we'll talk about them more when they get into some real games, but they certainly seem to be ready for the season. Then kind of turning to the spring breakout game Saturday evening to see the transformation the Orioles have made in terms of the pitching development in their minor league system, how many talented arms they now have. It was on full display. We saw Keeler Morphe to start the game, 18-year-old, 5'8" right-handed pitcher, throwing 99 out the gate. Now, the command struggled and he didn't make it out of the first inning, but he had a 2.76 ERA with a 35% strikeout rate in 33 innings last year between Dominican Summer League, and then he got called up to Low A Delmarva at age 18 as a pitcher. That doesn't happen often. That guy looks so athletic on the mound at only 18. It's really exciting. I know he's smaller, but it's electric stuff. There's still a lot of work to do. He'll probably begin the year back in Delmarva and hopefully get to Aberdeen at some point this season. But a really, really fun pitching prospect with legitimate stuff in this Orioles system. And we also got to see some other arms, Levi Wells again, who I've talked about. But the other guy who excited me that we saw on Saturday evening was Cameron Weston, 8th round pick for the Orioles out of Michigan back in 2022, 24-year-old right-handed pitcher. It's kind of a low sidearm-ish slot. It's got a fastball with good ride, a nasty splitter, a good slider. He spent most of last year in Double-A and posted a 2.97 ERA at 109 innings with the Bay Sox, a 29% strikeout rate to a 7% walk rate. He's really, really good It's not the most electric stuff compared to other guys in this system, but it's just that nasty splitter from that arm angle with the fastball. Cameron Weston, I mean, he is going to pitch for the Orioles. I'm not sure it's going to be this season. It's possible. I target more of him pitching for the O's in 2026, but Weston is the real deal in this system. I think he's going to get to Norfolk this year. Then we can really see that pitch data. Watch out for Cameron Weston. That was fun to see him just mow down some Yankees prospects on Saturday. And then to Sunday, Zach Eflin started the game that had no broadcast and no statcast. He got himself up to 84 pitches. Some guys get to 84 and they're kind of good for the season to start. Eflin most likely will get one more spring training start this week before he does go on opening day, which we'll talk about in a bit. But he feels like he's in a good spot. I mean, he'll probably cross 90 pitches in his next one and then be ready to go for March 27th. If you line him up for the 27th, though, that means you need him to get 4 days of rest you would like before that. So we're looking at the 23rd, 24th, 25th, and 26th. So the 22nd, which is Saturday, would be the earliest you would want him to start another game. He started Sunday, so you give him 4 days off. That's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So if he's going to get another start, it'll either be Friday or Saturday, and then he'll be on regular rest to begin the season. Albert Suarez started the other half of the split squad on Sunday. That was the game with StatCast data, and he was much better in this start. That's 2 starts in a row that have looked really good for Albert Suarez. He got 10 whiffs this time after 15 the last time. That's a good sign. All 4 of his pitches were playing well. Now, he did only throw 60 pitches in the game, and that was after he threw 70 pitches in his last start. So it's kind of moving in the opposite direction in terms of building up to be a starter for the season. We know it's basically him versus Cade Povich for the Orioles' number 5 starter spot to begin the year. Suarez, we know if he doesn't get it, will still start the year in the Oriole bullpen. Povich could be sent to AAA if he doesn't get that number 5 start. Suarez is still in contention, and TBD if he went to the bullpen and threw more pitches. That's totally possible. It's things guys do all the time in spring training to build up their pitch count. But it's interesting that he went from 70 to 60 in the game. And I'm wondering if that is any kind of key in that Cade Povich might have a leg up to get that number 5 spot. Whatever it is, Suarez's stuff was good. The curveball was great. All good signs for him. He's going to be, whatever the role is, he's going to be a part of this Orioles pitching staff to begin the year. And then finally, did just want to shout out Alex Pham, because Albert Suarez went 5 innings on Sunday, and Pham then pitched the final 4 innings in relief for the Orioles. Alex Pham, who was a 19th round pick back in 2021, 25-year-old right-handed pitcher, now the number 26 ranked prospect in the Orioles system. Another smaller guy, 5'10", but with really good stuff. Had a 4.24 ERA with a 28% strikeout rate and 119 innings in Double-A Bowie for Pham last year. He's got a real good chance to be in AAA Norfolk's rotation to begin the year, especially with Trevor Rogers and Chase McDermott starting the year on the injured list and Cade Povich potentially being in the big leagues. Those are 3 guys the Orioles thought might be in the Tides rotation to start the year that won't be. I think that opens up a spot for Alex Pham to begin the year in the AAA rotation. And at that point, like, you're at least being thought about for the major leagues. Really cool for Alex Pham. It was interesting to see his stuff on StatCast. 4 really good innings, scoreless baseball, fastball 94 to 95, cutter at 87, got 5 whiffs on 9 swings. Another guy I'm rooting for is Alex Pham, and as continuing that depth of the pitching in this Orioles system. But let's move to the hitting side. There were some interesting notes from some Orioles hitters this weekend, and we will get to them coming up right after this. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Well, you can crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1-ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better-for-you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller, longer. Now, I love the classic pistachios in the shell. I like to crack them open and get a pistachio in there, but the no-shells variety are awesome as well. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for those busy days, and so many amazing flavors that you can choose from. And hey, you get the protein in that snack as well. So get snackin and get crackin with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. So we move over to the hitting side in this Orioles spring training notes episode with basically just 1 week remaining. here of spring training games. We're getting oh so close, 10 days away from opening day for the Orioles. And for the hitters, we begin with Ryan Mountcastle, who hit another home run on Friday, this one going out to left center field. That gave him 3 consecutive spring training games with a home run. Adley Rutschman and Colton Cowser also homered in that game. Colton homered again on Sunday, which is all good signs. Adley had a couple more hits on Sunday, but specifically on Mountcastle, to see him open up the power. Last 2 homers have been to the pull side with the wall coming in and left. We want him to pull the ball in the air a lot more. Remember, he just stopped pulling it. He had the lowest pull rate of all qualified hitters in baseball in 2024. With that wall coming back in, that just can't be the case for Mountcastle to be the productive hitter that he can be for the Orioles this season. So you love seeing him hit some poolside homers. We want to see more of those this year. Then into the spring breakout game on Saturday, Enrique Bradfield Jr. showed off all the skills in the spring breakout. Leadoff single to the opposite side, went first to third on a pickoff error, scored on a wild pitch, and you're thinking, oh, anybody scores on a wild pitch from third base. This was a ball that skipped off the backstop and right back to the catcher. Bradfield still found a way to score with his electrifying speed, had a really good interview with the broadcast during the game, and we learned that he tragically lost one of his childhood friends just a couple of days before that spring breakout game. Still went out there, put on a great performance, played with a heavy heart. Really excited to see him hopefully get to Norfolk this year and certainly see what he can do. Also stole a base later in the game, and that can be no surprise with that one. Also got to shout out Vance Honeycutt. Vance Honeycutt, the Orioles' first-round pick from 2024. Inside the park home run in this spring breakout game, showed off all of his tools offensively and defensively. Excited to see him get going. And then what was also cool is you could see, it was these cool prospect games that the Orioles and Major League Baseball have put on. And the O's won it in walk-off fashion. They were down 4-3 against the Yankees prospects and scored 2 runs in the bottom of the 9th inning to win it. You saw DJ Layton get it started, 6th-round pick, a shortstop, picked out of high school in 2024, didn't play in the minors after the draft, so we haven't really seen a lot of DJ Layton at all, but he had a leadoff single. Then Austin Overn ripped an RBI triple into the right field corner to tie the game. 21-year-old left-handed hitting outfielder. Orioles took Overn in the 3rd round out of USC in the 2024 draft and was really good after the draft, had a 150 WRC plus in 93 plate appearances between low A Delmarva and high A Aberdeen in the minor leagues. Overn, I think, should pretty easily get to double A at some point this year, which is exciting. And then after a big second out with the runner stranded at third, Leandro Arias had the walk-off single up the middle line drive on an 0-2 pitch for the Orioles prospects to win it 5-4. Remember, he was the top signing in the 2022 international class for the Orioles out of the Dominican Republic. 20-year-old shortstop, switch hitter, was basically a league average bat between Delmarva and Aberdeen last year. Another guy who's hoping to get to double A this season, but still an interesting talent in this Orioles system. And it was cool to see him take that final swing, and all those Orioles prospects pouring out of the dugout to celebrate with Arias after the walk-off was pretty cool in a game that quote unquote didn't mean much, but they certainly took it like it did in that Orioles prospects dugout. Then on Sunday, just did have to shout out Heston Kjerstad. Again, not a guy I've talked about a lot this spring. He's looked pretty good. He's handled his business. He seems clear-cut path to be on this opening day roster and make some regular contributions to this Orioles lineup to begin the year. But I felt like Sunday he played in the game that had the StatCast data when the Orioles were at the Tigers. He really kind of showed out for the first time this spring. He ripped a double off our old friend Jack Flaherty, hit it 109.3 off the bat. His hardest hit ball last season in the big leagues was 108.5, so that would have been number 1 for Kjerstad. And it was also would have been his 2nd hardest hit ball overall last year. He had a single with an EV of 109.9 miles per hour in AAA last season. But then later in the game against Tyler Holton, who was like the do-it-all reliever for the Tigers last year, a lefty, probably a top 10 reliever in baseball, Kjerstad, it was a ground out, but hit a ball 110. That is the hardest hit ball of his career. Again, that 109.9 last year was the hardest. He hits a ball 110. That is really good to see on the exit velocity for Kjerstad. Just really excited to see him get his chance if he can stay healthy this year. And then Samuel Basayo, ho-hum, also had a single off Holton, hit it 101 off the bat. It was a sweeper on a 2-strike pitch running away from Basayo. It was actually probably a ball just off the outside corner. And Basayo just reached out and ripped it on a line into right field for a base hit. He is a special hitter. And man, I can't wait to, again, I tell you, every single time we do a spring training report episode, I talk about Samuel Basallo. I have done it again, and every time I say I can't wait to see him in the big leagues at some point this year, it is just a special, special, special talent at the plate. That was the pitching. That was the hitting. We've got some injury and kind of other news to get to finish off the show, and that's coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. Well, that is where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money, it isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. And when you start using Monarch, you can realize how much you're spending on like food delivery. Now you can budget smarter and save more. And instead of juggling multiple apps, use Monarch to check all of your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. So we finish things up on this Orioles Spring Training Report episode with just some injury updates and some other news and notes concerning the Orioles. We got a lot of news that came out of this weekend. We will start with something we already alluded to, and that is Zach Eflin officially will be the Orioles opening day starter. Now, coming into camp, it was pretty much a two-man race. Would it be Zach Eflin or would it be Grayson Rodriguez to get that opening day start in Toronto on March 27th? Of course, when Grayson Rodriguez went down with the elbow inflammation, made it pretty obvious who was going to get the gig. It was just a formality at that point, and the Orioles did tell Zach Eflin on Friday that he will be the opening day starter. Also a cool scene. The Orioles kind of got his wife and his 4 kids on FaceTime to break the news to Eflin. So that was very cool. And they posted a video of it. All power to Zach Eflin's wife at home with 4 kids, 3 years old or younger. That is a hero dealing with that at home. But Zach Eflin, it will be his second opening day start. He actually started opening day last year for the Rays. It ended up being his worst start of the season. He allowed 6 earned runs on 6 hits over 5 2/3 innings, 5 Ks, 1 walk, and allowed 3 home runs on opening day last year. Never allowed that many earned runs in a start for the rest of the year, whether it was with Tampa or with Baltimore. We know how good he was, a sub-3 ERA in his 9 starts down the stretch with the O's after the trade, had a solid playoff start in Game 2 of the AL Wildcard Series as well. He's going to be a big part of this Orioles rotation and just a cool honor for him to start opening day once again. And hopefully starting the track of, hey, here's the opening day start. How about signing an extension with us as well? That would certainly be nice moving forward. But speaking of Grayson Rodriguez, the reason why Eflin is locked in as the opening day starter, Rodriguez dealing with the elbow inflammation. The Orioles saying they were going to shut him down for 7 to 10 days, but we got some good and some bad news on Friday as well on Rodriguez. The good news is the plan is that Grayson Rodriguez is going to begin his throwing program at some point this week. Again, you're listening to this, watching this here on Monday. We're kind of unsure what day that throwing will begin. Hopefully it is on Monday, but the Orioles said early this week it will begin. The bad news of what Brandon Hyde said to the media on Friday is that they're not going to take any chances, and because of that, he's going to do a full ramp up. So when he begins throwing early this week, it's going to be like he had just started his throwing program, like whenever he showed up to spring training or even before that. So because of that, Brandon Hyde said, quote, it's going to take a while. And that could mean it's a couple of months. Even if he's all healthy and all goes well, it could be a couple of months. So at this point, you're crossing out all of April. We're not seeing Grayson Rodriguez in April. And feels like things would have to go perfectly to see him at any point in May. So right now, I would target June for Grayson Rodriguez to be back in this Orioles rotation. We will see as he does start to throw and how he feels, but obviously we'll keep our eye on that one. Also, positive news from Gunnar Henderson, who's been speaking with the media this weekend. Still has not gotten back into a spring training game, but Gunnar said on Friday he feels much better and he plans to be ready for opening day. Now, it's all about what Hyde, Elias, and the trainers say, but Gunnar has his eyes set on opening day. He said he's progressing, he's on the right track, and it doesn't feel nearly like it initially did with that mild intercostal strain that he suffered a couple of weeks ago. He said he wants to try to get into some games and get some late ABs this spring. March 24th, that is next Monday, is the Orioles' final spring training game. It's the exhibition in D.C. at Nats Park against the Nationals, and then opening day is on the 27th. So at worst, if he can maybe start that Monday game in D.C. and then keep swinging throughout the week and be in the lineup on the 27th, I think that would be totally, totally fine. Good news for Gunnar Henderson. We also got both sides of the story on Jorge Mateo. Obviously, if Gunnar does have to start the season on the IL, the Orioles would look at a guy like a Luis Vasquez or a Livan Soto to just put a guy on the roster who can play some shortstop, and then Jackson Holliday would move over and play short. You'd have Ramon Arias and Jordan Westberg in the Orioles infield as well. But Jorge Mateo said earlier this week that he thought he had a chance to be ready for opening day. He was taking BP, he was taking grounders. And then Brandon Hyde, like a day later, he got asked about it, and he said he still felt it was pretty doubtful that Mateo would be ready for opening day. Of course, Jorge Mateo suffered that elbow injury last August, got Tommy John surgery on his non-throwing elbow. Mike Elias kind of said all offseason it felt doubtful that Mateo would be ready for opening day. That was what we heard all spring. Then Mateo was like, I feel good. Brandon Hyde was like, maybe not. And then Mateo made his spring debut on Sunday, was in the starting lineup in a spring training game for the first time on Sunday, 11 days before opening day. You're getting into games. That doesn't mean he's going to have enough time to fully ramp up and be ready. And I think also with the way the roster works, like if Gunnar was on the IL, the Orioles would love to have Jorge Mateo be the replacement. Well, with the way the roster works out, it could be a little easier to just give Mateo those extra couple of weeks and start the season on the injured list. But with the way he's feeling and playing, I initially thought like they'd probably be without Mateo for all of April, and then at some point in May they'd have to make that decision. Now it seems like it could be more like mid-April that he's back and ready to go, and they may have to make a tough roster decision because, as I stated on the show on Friday, there is not like an obvious spot for Mateo to just take over on this roster right now. They have upgraded on the bench. I think they have 13 position players that fit better and that are better than Jorge Mateo right now. So we shall see. I think because of that, he will start the year on the IL, but he's going to be ready earlier than we thought. A really interesting decision is going to come up for the Orioles surrounding Mateo. And then finally, we do have a little Ramon Arias injury news. Like the Orioles need more injuries in this infield right now. Ramon Arias has not played in a spring training game since Wednesday. It turns out because he has a sore hamstring. Now, the Orioles are not super worried about it at this time. He did a full workout on Saturday, and Brandon Hyde said that on Saturday that he should be back into games soon. Also reiterated on Sunday that he's feeling a little bit better, and they're hoping to get Arias into spring training games sometime this week. So that is good. As long as he returns to spring games this week, the Orioles seem to think, and it seems like he would still be ready for opening day. And again, it's big for Arias because if Gunnar's not ready, Arias is going to play every day in that infield until Henderson comes back. So it's going to be another big chance for Ramon Arias. If it were that, Gunnar is ready, but Arias starts the year on the IL, and so does Jorge Mateo, that's when those guys like Luis Vasquez, Livan Soto, Vimael Machine are back into the mix of making the roster. If somehow both Henderson and Arias and Mateo are beginning the year on the IL, you'd probably see one of the Vasquez or Soto guys have a shortstop. And then that's when Emmanuel Rivera and Kobe Mayo probably jump back into the mix, because if you're without Arias and Henderson, you're looking at second base / shortstop / third base. You got multiple spots on that infield you're looking to fill, and Rivera and Mayo are more of the third base, first base guys, not as much of the middle infielders. But then Emmanuel Rivera is also feeling some soreness in his left shoulder, so he needs a couple more days to get himself ready. So really, if all these guys are dealing with these things, there is still a slight opening, I think, for Kobe Mayo right now to get on this opening day roster. Again, it would have to take a lot of these guys' issues lingering, but just Arias and Rivera now dealing with some soreness. Add them to the list with the Mateo and Henderson and the injuries in the infield. But it seems like nothing too serious for any of those guys at the moment. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen. Leave a 5-star rating and a review. It really helps the show. And of course, if you could like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube page, that helps us out as well. And if you have thoughts about the show, questions, mailbag questions, want to talk ball, you can always email me, lockedonorioles gmail.com. That does it for today. I'll be back tomorrow continuing the positional preview episodes. That'll be most of the rest of this week. We turn our attention to that infield that I've just been talking about that's dealing with some injuries. What will the infield look like? What will the O's do if Gunnar Henderson misses time? What will the O's do with Kobe Mayo this season? How will it all shake out, specifically at second base, shortstop, and third? We'll talk about that on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.